Hello, this is Dr. Darnise, and welcome back to Dr. Darnise's House of Magic, Religion, and Conjure. Once again, hello everybody. Welcome in to the house, and thank you for keeping up with me. Thank you to new subscribers, and if you click like and subscribe. Um, Today, I thought I would come on and talk about. Mm, to start sharing a little bit more about my own personal path, but really as a way of inviting you to think about how you are following the signs that you're getting from your own spiritual path. Because a lot of times we don't really realize that things are happening or the universe is responding to us all along. A lot of times we think that, our prayers, our requests are not being heard, the ancestors must not be hearing us. But if you really pay attention, you'll come to see that they are. So I thought I would share some pieces of my life, pieces of my story in terms of how I started to recognize the signs and how I delved into my own personal spiritual journey. Again, in hopes that it will help you think about yours, and again, to be intentional about how you live your spiritual practice. Because for me, that's the biggest thing, is that for us to be intentional. Because if we're not, then none of this really can be effective. Your spirituality, your magical practices, your hoodoo has to be a part of your regular life, or else you won't really get results and you'll always be wondering what's going on. So I would also like to just say that I want to start dropping in some videos, some teachings about various types of I'll just say spiritual paths and information on different spiritualities, just to help you feel like you can expand and feed your own calling. What is your journey? What has brought you to, sorry, I wrote myself a note. I wonder what that says. What has brought you to your own, to this space, really? What's brought you to alternative spiritualities? What's brought you to appreciate the African? What's brought you to appreciate any of this? Because it's not common, right? So, how did you get here? And where are you going? Where you want to be going? And are you primed to get there? Because intentionality is very important and your regular practice is very important. So that's what I'd like for you to think about for yourselves. And as I said, I'll share, some of my journey. And in future videos, I would like to share some whatever I think is important for our journey. And if you stay tuned to the end, I'll tell you about a special program that I am putting together. So I wrote some things down just because I kind of don't know where to start. Like when somebody says, "Tell me about yourself," and you're like, "Oh, where do I start?" So I guess, it's kind of like a life in review. I'm not going to start my whole life, but a life in review. I was always that kid who was into, I don't know, the supernatural, I guess I will say. And so I read a lot of stuff about the supernatural. I read about Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Egyptian mythology, not knowing that I was really searching for, the African. I was really always on a quest to know more than I was getting from any, Christian church that we might have gone to on occasion. My best friend's Baptist minister father was not helping me with the kind of questions that I had. And so I was that kid who was always in the library, checking out books, what's this? And by the time I was a teenager, my mother would ask me, why are you reading this? I would have books on reincarnation, and she was like, where'd you even get this? And I'd be like, oh, the library. So looking back, I can see that I was always on the path for my spiritual advancement towards my own awakening, enlightenment, what have you. And it never ends. I'm still on it, and I think if you're here on this channel, you're still on yours as well. It will just never end. So I guess I'll, tell you about a time when I was in my early 20s and I had just moved to New York, and I was uh, at that time working in the fashion industry. That was my first career, y'all. And but I was seeking, and I ended up going to some random classes, it seemed to me, on various kinds of spirituality. Like, I would just go to random things. It didn't even hardly matter. I just wanted to learn about different people's spirituality. So I ended up going to this class, and I couldn't even tell you what the class is really about now. I have no idea, actually. But what happened was I met the person who would become a mentor to me. And if I had met him on the street, I would never have thought. I just remember he was this tall, thin white man who was kind of quirky, and I probably would never have even spoken to him. But I took this class. It was just a 1 day class, and afterwards I went over to him, and for whatever reason, I said, "Would you? Is there a way I could continue learning this from you, or what would you recommend I read?" Again, nothing to do with the African. I'm not sure what it was about. um, and he said, "Okay, give me your phone number, and I will pray about it, and I'll let you know." Also, not any kind of traditional Christian anything. But that was his response. And so he called me a few days later. This is before we had any cell phones or anything. So he called me and he said, I prayed about it, and yes, I will agree to mentor you. So here's what I want you to read. And then we will get together and, we'll just discuss it. So, and I think about it, I'm like, this would never work nowadays, right? So here I was living in Brooklyn, right? And I would read this stuff and I would call him and he'd say, "Okay, come over." And I would take the train to his apartment and go into his house. And we'd talk about, the occult, weird spiritual kind of things. And I think now, no, nobody would do that now. Who is this random man? And you just went into his house? Yes. And we would spend like 2 or 3 hours talking about whatever. But I really felt like I was being fed from him and our interactions. And at a certain point, I don't know how many weeks this had been, several weeks, maybe a couple months at this point. And he said to me, "I'm getting ready to go back to Scotland, and I can't even tell you when I'm going to go, but I'm just going to be gone." He said, "You'll call me, and I'm not. He says the phone will be dead, and that lets you know I'm gone." And I said, "Well, what do you mean going back to Scotland?" He wasn't Scottish, but he had been spending time at this retreat in Scotland. And he said, "Yeah, it's time for me to go back. And I don't have my exact date, but I'm just telling you, I'm going to be gone." And I'm like, "You can't be gone because I just found you and I'm looking for you to be my mentor." And he said, "You know what? I think that we're complete." And I think he gave me a couple other books, and he gave me some things, right? And I really held on to those things, and we saw each other for a few more times, and then just like he said, I called him one time and phone is disconnected and he's gone. And of course at the time I was just like, oh well, but in retrospect over the years, I've always looked back on that and thought he was like the teacher. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. He was like this angelic force or something. The universe provided me with, "Hey, you're asking certain questions in your immediate environment. Here's somebody who can help you." And so I thought, wow, over these years, and still now, I wouldn't recognize him. I literally could not. I have no idea what his name is. I can't remember anything about this man, other than he seemed to be an answer to the questions I had at the time, and that the universe provided me with that teacher and mentor I needed at the time. And so I'm telling all this to say that, when we're purposeful on our spiritual path, we get the answers that we want and need. When we're paying attention, we recognize that those are answers to our prayers. If we're not intentional in paying attention, you're living kind of by default, like things are really random, you're not getting it. So I'm encouraging you to think about who have been the teachers or mentors for you along the way, and maybe in unexpected packages. Like I said, this guy, I wouldn't have even, thought to have small talk with him on the street. Because in our minds, we have, what we think our teacher should look like, I guess. Um, but he ended up being somebody who was very important to me. And some of the materials that he gave me, I was able to use later in a lot of different areas of my life. And I mean, I can remember he was literally like in his closet, like throwing things at me, like, take this, take this, take this. And I remember thinking, I don't want this, or I don't need this, or I don't know what to do with this, just papers. And he said, just keep it for later. And as I said, a lot of those things really came in handy later on, which is why I was able to reflect on that and say, wow, he really was in my life for that moment, for that season rather. And it's very clear to me that he prepped me so that I could move further into my spiritual path and be ready for the next teacher who would show up. Right? Because we got to be prepped. We can't ask for all these great teachings and we're not ready to receive them. So I really think it's almost like him standing on the street corner saying, "Here, I've got this for you. Go on down the road, right? Like, and you'll meet another teacher." So he's one of those checkpoints along my journey, one of those people who turned out to be really important towards my being here, even towards my being comfortable asking questions outside of the box, so that I could think about the occult, magic, and hoodoo, and not be afraid of it. Because so many people have questions, but they're afraid. They keep going to their churches or their temples, whatever, their mosques, and they have questions, but they're afraid. So I want to ask you, how is it that you're here? Are you feeling afraid for certain people to know that this is what you're interested in? Have you shared widely? So those are your questions, and I'll come back with another example or another episode in my life, how I got to this point. But as I said at the beginning, I am working on putting together a class for us, but I'm asking if y'all want this. So this is one of the classes that I do here at the university on African American religious history. And so I'm thinking of doing very simple format, just via Zoom. And I would take, some of the history, some of the things that I teach these students here and teach here. This is a very expensive university. So these kids are paying $65,000 a year for tuition and room and board. And so, they pay a lot of money for this kind of information, and they need, this is a Catholic university, they need to have 2 religion courses before they can, as requirements for their graduation. So they don't have to take my class, but they hear good things about my class, and my classes are always full. And so anyway, regardless of that, I just thought it would be great to take at least some of that and put it in a package for the people who are here, those of you who've been, listening to me for a while. And if I'm a teacher for you, then let me know in the comments if you would like to have that kind of course. So that would be a more formal course, formal in the sense that it would be a certain number of weeks, and, I'd have a particular, agenda for the day, so to speak, for that class, probably an hour or an hour and a half each. I haven't decided how many weeks, but there would be a tuition for it. And so let me know, are you interested in that kind of thing, and are you willing to pay tuition for it? Because like I said, these kids pay a lot of money. Anyway, I'm going to close there. Again, let me know about your practice, your teachers along the way, your mentors, how you got here. So I'll consider this part 1 of sharing my story. And that's all. Bye for now.